Hello, this is my video for white bread rolls. It's really quite straightforward. You only need a few ingredients, which I was following. It's quite simple. It's 500 grams of flour. I'm just using some white bread flour I got from Asda. 8 to 10 grams of salt. I'm just using some sea salt here. Yeast, you could either use 1 sachet of dry instant yeast, which is about 7 to 10 grams, or I've used some live yeast that I got also from Asda, which I think is about 18 grams worth here. I've got 310 grams of water at about 45 degrees centigrade, and I've got some olive oil. I'm going to use about 15 grams worth of olive oil. First thing I'm doing here is just mixing all the dry ingredients together. So that's the flour, the salt and the yeast. I'm just going to do this for a few seconds. So that's probably okay now. What I'm going to do is add the oil to the water. So I've got some measuring scales here and I want to get about 15 grams worth of oil. There we go, it's about right. Put the water and oil mixture into a mixing bowl. So this is a bit different to some recipes I've seen, because in a lot of them you're adding the liquid to the flour. I'm going to do it the other way around here. I'm going to be adding the flour mix bit by bit. And this really just reduces mess, because I find if you add the water to the flour it becomes quite congealed very quickly. If you do it this way, you'll find you have a smoother mixture. I'm going to start adding the flour mixture to the liquid, spoonful by spoonful. So I'll start off with a fairly big one, add that in, and take my wooden spoon, start giving that a mix. What I'm trying to do here is just build it up from a very kind of wet mixture to a more solid lump just over time. So I'm not going to rush this, I'm just going to keep stirring short term, add a bit more. You can see the yeast starting to activate there with the bubbles, so that's why it's quite important to have the water at a good temperature but not too hot. Add some more flour now. I'm just going to keep on doing this until all the flour has been sucked up into the sort of mixture. I've got all the flour in the bowl and it's starting to come together. One thing I find is really useful here is not getting your hands in quite yet. So actually, once you've got all the flour in with the liquid, if you just actually leave that for 5 to 10 minutes, you'll find that the dough mixture starts absorbing more of the excess flour that's on the outside, and it will just become a lot easier to handle in a few minutes. So that's the dough, and I'm just going to knead it for about 10 minutes. So I've got a pretty good solid dough mixture, slightly sticky to touch still. I'm now going to roll it into a ball shape. And I'm going to place this inside a bowl which I've just sprayed with some low-calorie olive oil. And we're going to leave the bread there for about an hour to cook the dough ball in the bowl. So just leave that at room temperature for about an hour, maybe put a cloth on it, and then hopefully it should double in size. So the dough's been proofing for an hour now. As you can see, it's risen quite considerably. So I'm just going to turn this out now and try and knock some of the air out of it. So the next thing is just to try and reshape it into another ball. So we've got a rough ball shape. Now you want 2 baking trays and use some butter or oil and just spray some on the baking trays or with the butter. That'll stop them burning. So once you've done that, take the dough and we're going to weigh it, and if we followed the instructions we should be something just over 800 grams when we weigh this. So yeah, 808, not bad. So we're going to split this dough into 8 pieces. which in this case is 101 grams for each one. That'll be slightly different for you, but essentially you need to take your big dough ball and chop it into 8 pieces, and what I tend to do is I'll cut it in half and then cut it into quarters and so on, and then try and get each piece down to just 100 grams there or thereabouts. The technique for this is pretty straightforward. That piece there is 95 grams, so I'm just going to take a chunk off one of the other balls, stick it on. We're at 98. That's now 99. You don't have to be super exact. It just helps when you're baking the bread, and it prevents one of the roll being too small and therefore baking too long, or one being too big and then being underbaked. So just do that for all 8 pieces, and you should have 8 pieces of dough. So you now should have 8 pieces of dough, roughly around 100 grams or maybe slightly over. They look a bit rubbish, so we're going to try and turn them into balls now. So the way I do this is I grab the dough with my hand like this, and I start circling it, just like that. It's kind of massaging it in a sort of rotational way. And eventually you're going to get a kind of ball. Now the next step, which is slightly fiddly with just one hand, is you're going to try and turn some of the dough back into itself, like so. And what this is doing is it's going to create a smooth surface on the opposite side, which is going to be the top of the bread roll. So if you keep doing that, if you keep trying to fold over and pinch in, eventually you're going to get a very smooth surface on the opposite side. And then again, just do a bit more rolling like that. And if you can, if you've got both hands free, obviously use both to try and stretch the top down, but you want to try and get 8 individual roll balls. They've got a very smooth top, like that. Now I've got 8 balls, and if you look at them, they're quite smooth on the top. Again, this is important, you get to this state, so remember to try and fold up or down, depending on which way you're trying to knead the balls. But essentially you're trying to stretch the top, so the top is very, very smooth, and this will give it a nice finish once they're baked. Now we have to leave these balls to sit there for 5 to 10 minutes. So we'll do that, and then the next step after that is to squash them into discs. So one of the final steps now, we've got 8 balls that have had their second prove, and we need to turn them into discs. So essentially what we're doing here is we're flattening the dough ball to get to the kind of bottom position from where it's going to bake and grow upwards. So we push it down like this. Just trying to stretch the dough out with your fingertips. And do that for all 8 of them. Try and keep them as circular as you can. So I've now got 8 flattened dough ball discs. We need to leave these for about an hour again for the 3rd prove, and then after that we can start baking. So leave these for an hour, and then we'll come back. So next we're going to heat the oven up to 170 degrees, thereabouts, or 190. It's a normal oven, so that's 170 fan assisted. I've got a little pan of boiling water here, which is optional. If you don't use this, it's fine. If you do use it, it tends to give a slightly better crust on the bread. So we'll put that in to the bottom of the oven. So with that pan of water in the oven, we'll now put the bread rolls into. For 17 minutes, thereabouts. 16 minutes is probably fine. 20 is probably too long, but hopefully after 16, 17 minutes, the bread rolls will have risen quite nicely. And if you put water in, they'll have a nice crust on too. That should be ready now. Let's have a look. Not the best, but they look alright. Get them out.